Hi guys, I'm making this video as a practice for checkpoint 2. So just like we did in checkpoint 1, you should get out a piece of paper, do these problems with me, and then use that piece of paper as your notes when you're actually doing your checkpoint. So these problems are very similar to the problems you'll see on the checkpoint. So if you go through and do these with me and then use that on your checkpoint, you should do very well. So number 1, what radical expression is equal to 15 to the 1/5 power? So in this lesson, you learned about how to convert between exponents and radicals. So the 1/5 power, that's the same as writing something like this, the 5th root of 15. Those are the same thing. Now, to actually write this answer in the answer space in the checkpoint, you have to write it out like this. You actually write the word 5th and the word root, and then you have parenthesis 15. It tells you that in the formatting. I'm just telling you right now so that you remember. You actually write out 5th root. If it's a 4th root, you write out the word 4th root. You do that for any of them. Number 2, rewrite this, the 4th root of 200, using exponents. So now the opposite of what we just did. They're giving you the radical. We're going to write it with exponents. So that would just be 200 to the 1/4. So you should feel really comfortable going back and forth between exponents and radicals. Number 3, we're going to evaluate this. Evaluate means actually give an answer, a number answer. So the 4th root of 625. So the 4th root means we need something times itself 4 times that equals 625. Now you could just sit here and guess if you wanted to, or you can do a factor tree. This is probably my favorite method for evaluating these radicals. So 625, I happen to know that that is 25 times 125. Oh, no, it's not. It's 25 times 25. That's what I was going for. 25 times 25. And 25 is 5 times 5. And this 25 is 5 times 5. So when I have the factorization of this, the square root of 625 is this, or the 4th root of 625 is the same as the 4th root of 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. So in a 4th root, we need 4 things that are multiplied by itself, and that would be our answer. I can bring that outside of this 4th root, so my answer for this would just be 5. You can double check yourself by going 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 and seeing if you get 625. Number 4, so they ask you to write this a to the b over c power in 2 different ways. So it's just asking you, think about this fraction just like we did up here. When we have a fractional exponent, we can write that using radicals. So whatever the denominator is, that is going to be what's outside the radical here. This is going to be the c root of a to the b power. So the denominator is always the radical, the number outside the radical. And then the numerator stays with that base. You could also write it like this. You could have the c on the radical of a and have all of that raised to the b power. Those are the same things. It doesn't matter in the order of operations whether you do the exponent first or the radical first in this problem. You can do either one. So this one you would do the exponent first and then do the radical. Here you would do the radical first and then the exponent. So that's your choice. Those are the 2 ways you can write that. Number 5, so a to the 3/4 divided by b to the negative 2/3. So the first thing I notice is I have a negative exponent. So I'm going to move that. You should remember that from this lesson. If there's a negative exponent, you can move it either to the numerator or denominator, the opposite of where it is right now. So I'm going to leave this a to the 3/4 where it is. And because this is a negative exponent, I'm going to move it to the numerator. So b to the 2/3. Now my denominator is just 1, or you can basically ignore it at this point. So that would be my answer right there. If I actually had numbers, I could evaluate it further, but I don't have numbers. If it asked you to write this with radicals, because I think that's what this problem asked you to do, to keep going into the radical form. So a to the 3/4, just like we did up here, the denominator is going to be what's outside that radical. So the 4th root of a to the 3rd. And for b, the denominator is 3, so it's going to be the cube root of b to the second. So either one of those answers, whatever the multiple choice gives you. Number 6, you have to rewrite the 4th root of 8 cubed using exponents. So it's kind of the opposite of what we were just doing. We took the exponents and wrote it in the radical form. Now we're going to take the radical form and write it in exponents. So I know my base is 8. The denominator is always the thing outside the radical. So I'm going to put that in the denominator of my exponent. And then this little 3 is the numerator. So 8 to the 3/4. Number 7, evaluate. Remember, evaluate means actually give an answer. So I have to actually give a number answer for this. So 64 squared, the cube root of 64 squared. So 64, I know, is 8 times 8. So if I'm doing 64 squared, I know that's going to be 8 times 8 and another 8 times 8. So right now I'm at the cube root of 8 times 8 times 8 times 8. For a cube root, I would need to find 3 things multiplied by itself for those to come out of the cube root. So rewriting this whole thing, I would have 8 that came out, and then the cube root of 8. I can keep simplifying this. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So I have another 3 things multiplied together that I can bring outside of my cube root. So right now I have 8 times 2 on the outside of my cube root, and I have nothing left in my cube root, so now that's gone. So final answer here is 16. That's not the only way to do this problem. When you get to these more complicated problems, there's often many ways to do it, and lots of different orders that you could do these things in. So this is just one suggestion. And last, it says simplify. So that should be a clue to you that there's probably not going to be just one answer like this one, 16. There might be something left under the square root. So I'm going to try to figure out 75. I know 75 is 25 times 3. That's helpful because under the square root, I can rewrite this as 25 times 3. Well, I know that, excuse me, 25 is a square root, or a perfect square. So 25, if I just take the square root of 25, that's 5. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. So I know the square root of 25 is 5. I don't know the square root of 3 because it's not a perfect square. So this is as far as you can simplify that problem. And again, if you're writing this in your answer on the checkpoint, you're going to write 5 and then square root. You actually have to write out the word of 3. That's how you would write your answer on the checkpoint. So again, hopefully you did all these problems with me, and you can use this paper when you actually do your checkpoint for a score.